Making Sense with Mathquez is a weekly podcast where you can find tips on teaching and parenting, as well as weekly reflections based on biblical principles, or as we like to call them, chicky nuggies of wisdom. And now, your host of the show, my Poppy.
Welcome back to Making Sense with Mathquez. So this week I have a time-saving tip for you that doubles as an exercise in gratitude that I hope you'll find useful and encouraging. Like many of my teaching tips and tools, this definitely did not originate between my ears, so much love goes out to the people that have been doing this longer than I have. Before jumping into the tip of the week, here's some context. There are certain predictable times throughout the school year that are notably more challenging than others. For some, that's November, as kids start counting down the minutes before the holiday season. For others, it's March, typically the longest month of the school year because there are seemingly no holidays to celebrate. Whenever these times exist for you, I encourage you to leverage the power of gratitude. Just use the Google machine to look up science of gratitude, and you'll find a few benefits to practicing this discipline of gratitude, from reducing stress and increasing your capacity for joy, to strengthening relationships and increasing resilience. And I think that there's an opportunity here for some biblical application. The Bible says in Proverbs 17:22, "A joyful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones." So how can we cultivate an attitude of gratitude that will result in being joyful when faced with the predictable crushing challenges throughout the school year? Thank you notes. Yes, that's right, I said thank you notes. My challenge for you is to spend some time over summer crafting personalized gratitude notes that you can tailor to your students later on next school year. Don't know how to draw? That's okay. If you're not comfortable with trying to learn how to draw, you could always use clip art and design these on Publisher or any digital format you choose. Personally, I like taking advantage of both options, being able to create things by hand and then making copies of templates as well. I'll show you what I mean here. Here's some things that you might need: blank sheet of paper, pencil, ruler, marker, some inspiration. If you like to create a template, one idea would be to take a blank sheet of paper and break it into 4 equal parts. Use each space to create the front side of your thank you note. Here's where your inspiration comes to play. What are some thank you notes that you've seen that you like and you think that you could recreate? I like drawing simple banners and incorporating mustaches so that my students will know it's from me. So they often see doodles of mustaches in nearly everything that I produce for them. And take your time with these. I like sketching these out with a pencil and then going over them with a felt tip marker like a Flair pen or a Sharpie. And once you're all done, you can make multiple copies, cut them into individual cards, and then you're ready to tailor them to your students by adding their names, something that you appreciate about them, really any encouraging word that you like. Not only are you laying the foundation for gratitude later, you're also maximizing your creative space now so that you can focus your time and attention in hunting for things you appreciate about your students later on. This practice also tends to protect against the default setting that we may have to highlight a negative feature about a student or to be discouraged by a negative interaction. I think you're more likely to cultivate a joyful classroom if you're armed with the tools ready to share your gratitude months before you even meet your students. More in just a sec.
Hello again. This is my little brother, Joseph.
Papa! Papa!
Can you do me a favor? Can you please like, subscribe, and share this podcast? If you don't, it'll make Joseph sad. Please don't make him sad.
So last week, I promised you that I would spend some time sharing one of my favorite stories. I'm excited about it. It's an artifact share, and here goes. I don't know about you, but selecting just one artifact to talk about is a real challenge for me. Maybe it's the length of my time on earth or the years spent in classrooms that have taught me to be so reflective about almost anything I come across and use them as object lessons. Yes, indeed, the options of items I have that I could share about is a long and growing list. See, I could talk at length about this stuffed animal called an ugly doll, and how it was one of the first toys we bought for our first son, Louis, over 16, 17 years ago, and why I actually have a tattoo of this thing on my calf. If you're interested, we can chat about that later. I could also share a few words about this t-shirt, the words printed about a missionary to Ecuador who was killed by the people he was there to serve, and how I wore this shirt the day our fourth son, Joseph, was born, the only son I wasn't too afraid to see emerge from the womb. And yes, I'd love to talk more about that later. But no, instead, I wanted to share a piece of candy with you. You see, long before I wore this shirt, long before we bought this toy, I found myself in a van, driving down Interstate 80, driving from Michigan to New York City at the tail end of a whirlwind romance with a teacher I had met just a couple of months before. We had ended our engagement, and I was completely broken. I was crushed. And with tears streaming down my face, I cried out to God, God, I am done with women. I said, I don't know what you have in store for me, but if you have someone in mind, then she's the one who will have to propose to me. Weeks would go by, and as my heart began to heal, my paths crossed with those of a young lady I've known since middle school. Her grandmother and my mother taught in the same school in the Bronx for over 20 years. My mom would drive her brother and me to school every day for 5 years through high school. Her mom taught 6th grade at the same school, and I was her teaching assistant in high school. Her family even sat right in the pew behind ours at church on Sundays. And there she was. There was Lily, standing outside of our church waiting for her ride one Sunday afternoon. Hey, remember when we used to be friends? I shouted from my car as I parked nearby. 6 weeks later, we were on a date, caught in the rain, and we found ourselves somewhat trapped inside of my then 1977 Mini Cooper. Lily breaks the awkward silence by turning to me and offering me a ring pop and asking me to marry her. Yeah, she probably meant it as a joke, but this was no laughing matter to me. This was an answer to prayer. The first of many answered prayers that started our marriage and that has sustained our marriage. Through every worn out t-shirt and through every broken toy. So that's all we have for this week. Until next time, thanks so much for listening. The Bible says in Proverbs 10:21, the lips of the righteous nourish many, but fools die for a lack of sense. So here I am, just a follower of Christ, trying to live out my faith and make sense of the world around us, hoping to share some nourishment every week. Now, if you appreciate this content, please do me a favor and consider subscribing and sharing this podcast with others you think would benefit from tuning in.